Welcome to the Sleep is a Skill podcast. My name is Molly McLaughlin, and I own a company that optimizes sleep through technology, accountability, and behavioral change. Each week, I'll be interviewing world-class experts ranging from doctors, innovators, and thought leaders to give actionable tips and strategies that you can implement to become a more skillful sleeper. Let's jump into your dose of practical sleep training. Welcome to the Sleep is a Skill podcast, and I am very excited to have you listen to today's episode. The reason that I chose light therapy to be episode number 2 was very intentional. And if you're going to stick around and listen to more of the Sleep is a Skill podcast, get ready to learn a lot about light. And why is that if we're talking about sleep? Well, we'll certainly go into more detail on this episode and future ones, but light is crucial to the alignment and strength of your circadian rhythm. So we're going to go into understanding exactly how to get connected to that. And my guest is quite the expert in that area. So I want to read you a little bit about what he has accomplished in the field of light therapy and circadian rhythms so that you can get grounded in the connection to this awesome thinker in this area. So Jamie Zeitzer is Chief Medical Officer of Lumos Health and Associate Professor of Stanford Sleep Sciences and Medicine. He's a clinical champion and pioneer in the field of light therapy and circadian rhythms. And Dr. Jamie Zeitzer is a research professor at Stanford Center of Sleep Sciences and Medicine, a member of Stanford BioX, and Chief Medical Officer of Lumos Health. He received his Ph.D. in neurobiology from Harvard in 1999 and has spent 25 years of his research career focusing on light, sleep, and circadian rhythms. Over the past few decades, Dr. Jamie Zeitzer has published over 123 papers in established journals and championed over 5 sleep-related clinical trials. His 6th trial, Bright Light, as the Countermeasure for Circadian Desynchrony, is currently hiring. In 2019, Dr. Jamie Zeitzer co-founded Lumos Health, a medical technology startup in the field of light therapy, providing research-oriented and clinically effective light therapy products combined with the latest nano-technology to create a personalized light environment for people looking to improve their sleep and well-being. Now, sit back and relax because you're going to really enjoy today's episode as we dive deeper into what you need to know about sleep and light therapy to make a difference in your sleep performance. So Jamie, welcome to the Sleep is a Skill podcast. Thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule to be here. I really appreciate it. And I'm so excited to dive in more on your large body of knowledge. But before we begin, I just want to say thank you for making the time.
Oh, it's my pleasure to be here. Talking about sleep is kind of, it's my passion. It's what I do for a living.
Amazing. Good. Well, it's always a pleasure to meet other fellow sleep enthusiasts. And so we're going to have fun today. Basically, I went into in the bio on all that you've accomplished, but just to begin, I'd like to even start at the basics for those of us who are not as well versed on, this field of light therapy and circadian rhythms as you are. If we could just start at the beginning of why this is important. Why do we even care about talking about this around sleep? We just want to get the quick fix. People are exhausted. Why go into some of this, the science behind light?
Sure. So when we talk about sleep, one of the fundamental things that kind of drives when we sleep are circadian rhythms. And this circadian rhythm is something that most people don't think about much, but anytime you travel and you have jet lag, that jet lag and that kind of experience of being unable to sleep, that is directly caused by the circadian clock telling you to be awake when you want to sleep and being asleep when you want to be awake. And this is kind of a fundamental part of biology. It's something that is present in every single organism that has ever been studied on the planet Earth has one of these 24-hour circadian clocks. So there's something really important about it. And we're not exactly sure, what's so important, but, it helps to basically organize, all sorts of parts of the brain, the body, physiology, your metabolism, your immune system, your heart, your memory, kind of everything is somehow touched by the system and really help coordinated by the system. And the way that we keep the circadian system kind of aligned is through regular light exposure. And it's something that people don't think about. People don't think about what kind of light they're getting, when they're getting the light, how they're getting the light, and how this might be impacting you. And even though, for example, the light that you're getting, say, right now in the middle of the day might have a really strong impact on your sleep tonight. And so these are things that people really don't think about, but are incredibly important and can have a super strong impact on how one sleeps.
Really great, kind of foundation and primer to why this is important. So knowing the why really can help spawn, the interest and intrigue to start to unpack this topic a bit more. So I really appreciate that. So, okay. So if we can all agree that the why is there, that the light is important, it's tied into our sleep and our circadian rhythm. Now, from that place, there's a bunch of things that we can begin to do. And, in our modern day society, there are now some, gadgets that we can also bring into the conversation. And one of the reasons that I even was connected with you is seeing your product at CES that you've developed around bringing this concept of light therapy and blue blockers into a, nice kind of seamless, piece of tech. So I was wondering if you could share more about that, how that came to be, why that's important to you, how people could use something like that.
Sure. So, we've known for about 30 years or so about how important light is in terms of driving circadian rhythms and sleep. And, for a little less time, but still for more than 20 years, we've really understood, how to deliver light in order to generate, better, healthier sleep patterns. Problem's always been a behavioral one. So I can tell you when you need to get the light, but it's not like you just do it once and then you're set for life. This is something that really needs to happen nearly every day. And because of that, the way that it's delivered has always been kind of a barrier to having good, healthy light exposure. So, for example, I could say, well, for you really need to get, a lot of light in the morning, and that would make you feel much happier and give you better sleep. But in order to do that, you need to sit in front of a light box for 2 hours every morning.
Right.
Say, well, that's nice, but, I don't have the time to do that.
Right.
These are big, they're ugly, and it requires you sitting in front of this light box and not doing much else for 2 hours. That in theory it works, but in reality, it's not an efficient way to deliver the light. And so Lucas Wen, who invented this light therapy device, it basically came to me, and I was very excited because unlike standard light therapy devices, this is one that is wearable and doesn't look weird or ugly. So
yes.
I thought that was kind of a cool,
remarkable.
Yeah.
It's not easy.
No, not at all. And so it's something that actually people might wear this.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought that was kind of neat. And, the idea basically is that, people need light at different times of day, depending on exactly their sleep schedule and what they want to do. And one of the main drivers of this is kind of the blue light exposure that you're getting.
Right.
And so the idea is, well, what we're going to do is, we're going to just take away all the blue light. We're going to block all the blue light that you're getting from the outside. And then we're going to give it back to you using blue LEDs when you need it. And it's trying to make it as seamless as possible with the idea that, if you have to sit there and turn it on, turn it off when you feel like it, when you think it should be done, you might do this. And if you're really motivated, you'll do it for a little while. But frankly, it's going to end up in a drawer. Mm-hmm. So really, for something that is going to be really kind of a daily thing, it needs to be as seamless as possible. Something which you don't think about. You just you pop your glasses on and they're automatically programmed to adapt to your behavior, not the other way around.
Yeah, this is really exciting to me for a bunch of reasons. So a lot of the clients that I work with, so even just unpacking this idea of light, because there's so much to it, because of course you're touching on a couple things, this concept of kind of light anchoring in the morning, mm-hmm. and then of course being cognizant of our blue light exposure throughout, the rest of the day and into the evening, and then just these strategic kind of this dosing of light at the time in which we need it. So I have, tons of clients that, they're living in often urban environments, I have a lot of people in climates where, they have a very heavy duty winters come through. And for them, there's a lot of reasons why not to get the natural light.
Mm-hmm.
And so then when pulling in this whole light box concept, to your point, it just doesn't seem to bring about the ability to bring this new habit regularly. So I'm just curious if you can walk us through, is this something too where your vision is that people would wear these all throughout the day and then it would kind of seamlessly kind of be able to dose this light in the morning, and then throughout the rest of the day, then it's just auto blue blocking so that you're not having to think about both of those throughout the entire course of the day?
Right. So, yeah, I mean, just to, reiterate one of your points, which I think is
Sure.
absolutely critical, which is that, look, in an ideal world, you'd be outside all day.
Right.
It'd be bright sunshine. It'd be beautiful weather. You get a lot of light. There is far more light that you're going to get outside. If it's a nice day outside, you're going to be getting 10,000, 20, 30, 50,000 lux of light.
Yes.
It is far more than anything we're ever going to deliver inside an office, inside a bedroom, inside, a living room. It's just it. So that is definitely healthier. But as you point out, not everyone can do this.
Right.
It's too hot outside, so you can't go outside. It's too cold outside. You can't go outside. Your job doesn't allow you to do this. If you're in poor health and can't do this, there's so many reasons why people can't do this. And, having a built environment is nice where, you can put in, very nice LEDs into your house. It gets expensive and it frankly doesn't necessarily deliver the kind of light you need. And so, the idea with this kind of wearable thing is, this is something that, I think that you could wear all day, and it will basically just, kind of control the amount of blue light that you're getting. So, in individuals who want to go to sleep earlier, you're really going to want to anchor that blue light in the morning. If you want to go to sleep later, actually you want to do something a little different. So if people want to go to sleep later, then you're going to want to have more of that light in the evening, and you actually also want to decrease the amount of light during the day. So one of the odd things about the system is that when you're getting light in the evening, it's actually comparing it to how much light that you had during the day. So if you go outside all day and then you get room light at night, that really doesn't do much to your system. But if you're in an office all day, especially a poorly lit office, and then you go home and you're in a well-lit home, that's going to have a major impact on how you sleep and when you sleep. And so really it's thinking about not just, the beginning and the end of the day, which are definitely, biologically super important points, but it's throughout the day. All of that light exposure really starts to matter and starts to change how you respond to light.
So interesting. Okay. In your experience, have you been able to find certain ways to help really illustrate this topic or the importance of this for people? It's even getting me thinking about there's certain apps where you can measure the lux output, right? Like how crazy it is when you're in a Starbucks and it's like 60 lux or something. And then you go outside and it's just overwhelming. The difference becomes so clear. And suddenly there's something about those numbers that people get it. And you make that argument that you can see the difference in your, sleep stats or what have you. Has there been a way for you to be able to really help paint this picture for people, that this is where we want to begin, not necessarily, of course, bed hygiene and, all those things are important. And this is really where we want to focus in on in a lot of respects as far as improving our sleep.
Sure. I mean, I wish I knew a good way.
Yes. Good answer. All right. Good. Yeah.
I mean,
I'm continually looking for that. So just curious.
Yeah, no, it's hard. I mean, basically, people, when you're talking about light and talking about kind of circadian rhythms and even sleep, one of the problems is that, most of the things that we can talk about from a scientific perspective are so far in the future that it doesn't matter. So if you say, well, you should get better light, because then you'll sleep more regularly, and in 60 years, you'll have a reduced chance of Alzheimer's. People are like, well, yeah, but I want to go out tonight.
Right.
And so we don't have a very good way of kind of explaining the trade-offs at this point. And I think it's an incredibly, important point, that you make, which is that, how do you communicate this so that people understand, how important this is? And, it's one of the reasons that I like, this kind of product, but even just in this product class of things that are more passive, where people don't have to think about changing something, changing their behavior. And, frankly, changing the light doesn't change your behavior. What changing the light will enable you to have a different behavior. So, for example, if you're getting a lot of light in the morning because you want to go to sleep more regularly and you want to go to sleep earlier, that light in the morning doesn't make you do it, but it does make you able to do it. So without that light in the morning, it's actually really hard to go to sleep earlier. It's really hard to get that stable bedtime. But when you do get the light, then you can do it. And again, this is something which is difficult for people to get. And, hopefully, through exposure, to podcasts like yours, people start to understand, I hope, that this is something that's important, and it's something that, is a small change that can have really, long-lasting, health effects for both, physical and mental health.
So great. So I'm wondering too, if we can, because it's clear you and I are just team light, like, let's do this. And I'm wondering if we can even back up to just get a little bit more of the science behind light therapy, or even just, kind of a basic understanding for those people who this is just a whole new conversation, and how, just how this actually works and why our eyes are so important as it relates to, our biological clock and timing, how that relates to melatonin production. Just some of that would be amazing.
Sure. So, when most people think about, light and light exposure, the thing that they rightfully always go to is image formation. Light allows you to see things.
Right.
If the lights are on, you see objects in space. If the lights are off, you can't see anything. So, for a very long time, this is how people viewed, the function of light. It allows us to see objects. And it's really only been in the last 30 or so years that we've understood that there are many other functions that light has in people. Now, for a little longer, we've known this in animals, but for a long time, people thought, well, other animals are different than humans. Humans have these big brains, and we can kind of just ignore stuff.
Right.
But light gets in, and it actually works through both the rods and cones, which are kind of the photoreceptors in your eye that allow you to see objects, as well as something that was discovered about 20 years ago, which is something called melanopsin, which is present in kind of a very small set of cells in the eye called technically, they're called intrinsically photosensitive retinoganglion cells. And these cells specifically go to parts of the brain that are involved in things other than seeing objects in space. So it helps to manipulate hormone concentrations in the brain, alertness, pupil size, circadian rhythms, timing of sleep. There's all sorts of stuff, that's involved in. And, anyone who has migraines, when they get exposed, especially to sunlight, well, this is the pathway that's acting through. And so, it's a real strong biological pathway. And, light is the thing that's basically helping, helping kind of synchronize this pathway and say, these are things that should happen in the day. These are things that should happen at night. And there are both these short-term and long-term effects that it has. But, again, all of these are going to be mediated through this kind of alternate pathway from the eye that really has very little to do with seeing things in space. So much so that, for a long time, people who were blind often had their eyes removed. And it was done because, the eyes would be often get infected because they didn't blink in response to like a bug or dirt getting in the eye. So there often be infections. And a lot of doctors thought, well, if you can't see, why are we keeping the eyes around if they're just becoming a problem with this? And what ends up happening when you do that is, if you take out the eyes, all of a sudden, all of these other things that light is doing that still works in most people who are blind, where they can't see objects, but they still get light information into the brain. All these other things, they don't work. And all of a sudden, you have people who are blind who can't sleep very well anymore because they're no longer getting this light into their brain.
So fascinating. Very, very interesting. Wow. So just even backing up with that, so we're getting grounded in this importance of light, of how if we've decided, yes, it is linked up with sleep, you're also connecting it to some of these other, just there's a wide net that's cast when our light exposure gets thrown out of whack. And then from that place, then we end up having a lot of physical and health issues. So with that, you had even alluded to in the beginning of this conversation about the link ups with Alzheimer's down the road, when we're not getting enough of this light exposure, and it's impacting our sleep. Could you share more about some of the other things that can go awry when our light exposure begins to get out of whack? What are some other kind of physical problems?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, when you have irregular light exposure, and again, this can happen for a variety of reasons. People have, unusual schedules, especially, if they have unusual work schedules, or if they kind of have an earlier schedule than they want to during the week, they might flip on the weekends. So there are a lot of reasons for people to have unusual light schedules. Basically, every time we look, we find something bad. So if you look at someone's immune system, that doesn't function as well. So people, they get sick more often, and that's in the short term. In the long term, there's a greater incidence of cancers. When you look at their, metabolic system, that's disrupted. So, people are less well able to maintain regular use of energy. And there's a link with, obesity. There's a link with mortality, people dying younger. I mean, so basically every time that we looked at a particular aspect of human health, we see that, irregular light exposure, is associated with it somehow. Now, it's not saying that, if you have a regular light exposure, you're going to get cancer next week. That's not what I'm saying. These are all, relatively small effects, but it's an effect that we can control. And that's kind of the key thing. And that it really is a key component to, good biological and mental health. So if, people are thinking about, well, I exercise, I eat well, and I'm still not feeling that great. Well, if your bedtime, changes from, 10 o'clock on the weekdays to 4 o'clock on the weekends, and you go back and forth, and then even during the week, sometimes you're up late and sometimes you go to sleep early. This is going to contribute to it. This kind of irregularity. And, I think that the best kind of way to think about this is that, what the light is doing is it's keeping your circadian clock as robust as possible. And the circadian clock, you have clocks all over your body. And the central circadian clock, which is in the hypothalamus of the brain, in a place called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, is really the central conductor for all the clocks. And so, if you think of an orchestra, and each of the organs as, a different group in the orchestra. So, maybe the liver is, are the strings, and maybe, the kidney, well, they're the brass. And so, yeah, sure, without a strong conductor, the strings play well together and the brass plays well together, but they don't play with each other very well. So they're just off just a little. And you can tell the difference between, when you've got a good, strong conductor and all of the instruments in the entire orchestra are playing synchronously. It just sounds better than if each group is playing well together, but not with all the other groups. And this is really what light is enabling. It is really enabling this really good, strong conductor to make sure that everything in the body is synchronized.
So well said. This paints such a clear picture of the importance of that. One of the questions I'm always getting from people is they want to know, okay, fine. So if I got to get this light, I'm desperate to improve my sleep. Just tell me what to do around light. Of course, you're providing this kind of seamless optionality that will be coming out, later in 2020. And in alignment with that, I'm wondering if you could kind of walk us through a day in the life for you with your light exposure. Like, what are some of the ways that you're mindful of light exposure that maybe the average person isn't? Like, what does that look like from when you kind of wake up and, how you set up your environment, until you go to bed, what are some of the things that you might be cognizant of that the average person isn't?
Sure. So, part of it is, I wake up, my shades are open, so I have to get up early, not necessarily by choice,
Yes.
but I get up early in the morning, and so I have the shades are open, so when the sun comes up, that's helping me wake up. If I'm going to, walk to work, I'm getting a lot of light there. My office has, a window. It's not a fantastic window, but it is a window. Facing the window, you get a lot of light exposure. And then in the evening, making sure that, the lights are kind of turned down. And, there's a lot of focus on, how much blue light is in the light that you're getting.
Yes.
But, one of the big things is just how bright the light is. So, if you have a very blue light, but it's kind of dim, it's not going to have much of an impact. And if you have a very kind of warm light with a lot of red in it, but it's bright, that's going to have a big effect. And so just kind of being aware of this, really kind of helps, to synchronize that kind of light exposure on a daily basis. And, the other thing is that, there are a lot of programs out there. There's Flux, there's Night Shift, a number of programs that will kind of change your screen temperature, the color temperature of your screen. And this is great. It's nice. You get less blue light at night, so it's less alerting, more enabling for sleep. But the thing that you need to kind of be aware of is that it doesn't mean then that what you're doing on the computer is okay. Right. And this is what people forget. They're like, oh, well, I'm playing my video game.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm on social media. I'm working. I'm watching Netflix. Whatever I'm doing, but because the screen color, has been shifted, it's safe. Well, that's not the case at all, because most of these things that you're doing have been gamified to make sure that you keep your eyes on the screen. My favorite quotation is Reed Hastings, the CEO of Netflix several years ago, said that his biggest competitor was sleep.
Yes. Yeah, that's a great quote.
And,
and alarming.
It is. But it's true is that, just because, your screen has changed colors doesn't mean that, that playing that game now is okay. Because basically what ends up happening is you're on social media, you're gaming, whatever it is that you're doing, all of a sudden you realize, wow, 3 hours have passed in your blue-free, light. But it's still, it really is discouraging for sleep. It's promoting definitely a degree of wakefulness that makes it much more difficult to get regular sleep. So kind of, being aware of, the limitations of light. It's not going to make you go to sleep. It'll just enable you to go to sleep. This is kind of something which is, important to be aware of.
So interesting. So, some of the people that come to sleep as a skill, I do get a lot of people that might identify as, biohackers, and they're really into the metrics of, okay, fine. So I'm going to test this out, and I'll do this for 30 days, and we'll see how it impacts my sleep. And so they'll look at numbers, like total sleep duration, some of their, depending on, their gadgets, if they're able to get some of their EEG readouts, then they'll see if there's a certain change in some of their sleep stages. They'll want to know, how's my HRV being impacted, my heart rate, temperature, all these things, right? Have you been able to pin down any of those changes that you might expect if you were to really dial in this area for yourself?
Sure. Yeah. So this is something that we've been interested in for a while, is trying to figure out, what should we be measuring?
Right.
So, when we talk about light and then we talk about sleep, people talk about the quality of the sleep that you're getting. And I don't know what that actually means. Because I can tell you is that, if I asked you how you slept last night, you'll give me an answer, whatever that answer is. If I record heart rate variability, EEG, skin conductance, anything at this point, there is nothing, and this is something that we've looked at now in more than 5,000 people. There is no signal there that tells us how you slept in terms of your subjective perception. And in the end, when thinking about sleep, and the quality of sleep, in the end, for most people at this point, what we're talking about is the subjective. Is that what they care about is not that they slept 7 hours or 10 hours or 5 hours, but then when they woke up, they felt refreshed.
Right.
They felt good. And we don't know why they say that. You have people come into a sleep lab, they get recorded with every gadget that we have. And you'll say, well, we looked at your sleep and it looks absolutely normal. And they'll go, that's weird because I didn't sleep at all last night and I felt terrible. So, we don't really have a good understanding of why people say this. And so I really focus on when people talk about, sleep, most people actually don't care about sleep. What they care about is how they feel from sleep. So if they got a good night's sleep, that's great. But if they feel alert during the day, if they feel good at work, if they feel happy, all of these things are things that sleep is facilitating. And, for me, in terms of the biohacking aspect, is I would really focus on kind of, what are the things in your day that you care about and how does sleep impact that? Then go back and take a look and say, well, what part of sleep did I change, that made that better? So, for example, people have shown that when you have the more regular light exposure and, more regular timing of sleep, that, students' grade point averages go up. And so I'd say, well, if you're a student, maybe that's important to you. Not every student, but, some people that's going to matter. But it's really going to require, in order for us to convince people about the importance of this, it'll be, what's the trade-off? So it's, well, how irregular does my sleep have to be, or how regular does it have to be in order for me to perform better at work, in order for me to, to get better grades, in order for me to be better athletically, whatever it is that's kind of important to you, that's kind of, the information that we need to get out there is to show you how, well, maybe, having a slightly more regular sleep schedule is going to make all that stuff better. So maybe instead of going out, 3 or 4 nights a week, maybe you go down to 2 or 3 nights, and maybe your days will be that much better and you'll get that much more out of when you do go out. But this is information that we really don't have yet, but it's incredibly important in terms of, convincing people of, why this is important. So, I think that with people who are, into biohacking, these are people who are already convinced. You get a lot of people, a lot of athletes, you don't need to convince an athlete. Most athletes already understand that sleep is going to give you a little extra boost. And that might be the difference between, coming in first and coming in last in that race, hitting the free throw or not. I mean, there are a lot of, subtle differences that sleep's going to bring about for those individuals. But I think it's for much of the rest of society, we don't have, I think, the tools yet to convince them in a meaningful way, or at least I don't have those tools to convince them in such a way.
Yeah, no, I completely hear you on that topic, and it must be so interesting with the amount of work you've done, and you're so deep in this conversation and so clear to you, and then when you see how so much of society conducts themselves as it relates to light, and we're seeing more and more output of LEDs all over the place that are not strategic in the way that your product is, and there's just a really seemingly a lack of awareness on these topics. And I love what you said too about some of the habits that we're bringing in, and many of us have this false sense of security. Like we've already covered that topic, oh, well, I've got the night mode on my phone. Don't worry about it. I'll maybe just watch a little TV before bed, but no big deal. And these not little, but these habits then can have a big impact unbeknownst to many. So and to your point, it's the challenge often can be, how do we measure it? It is subjective. Why is it different for some people that, as you said, you're able to, have them in a sleep lab and everything looks pretty fine and they did not feel that way. So what's kind of going on here? So we're pulling out a lot of topics here, and it's really interesting. And I'm curious, could you just share with us some of the reasons that you yourself are so committed on this topic? Like, following your journey of being in this field for so long, what are some of the reasons that, you just have such a passion for this? And, is it something where you have, the rest of your household and your friends kind of along in this conversation? Or do you feel like, you're a bit of a pioneer on this topic and, kind of trailblazing?
Well, I wouldn't say trailblazing, but yeah, I find it interesting because basically I think it's important I think that for human health, for much of our medical history, we are typically very responsive to health problems. So someone gets sick and then they get treated. And that's fine. And that works to a degree. But I think that for many things, these are much slower events and much slower processes. These are things that take, years to develop. And if we're able to have subtle changes in people's behavior, for example, through light exposure and circadian rhythms and sleep, if we're able to have smaller changes to that, I think that in the end, that will keep us healthier. And I think that it is much easier to keep someone healthy than it is to make them go from sick to healthy. And so I think that, for a long time, well, this is a nice idea, but there's no way to kind of track this stuff. Right. But now with existing technologies and kind of technologies that are coming out in the next few years, I think it gives us greater and greater ability to basically, see how people's choices that they make, small choices throughout the day, over weeks, months, years, really kind of have these long-term impacts on health. And, to me, that's the way to get people, healthier. And I'm glad people are out there working on, cures for acute diseases and things like that. And that's fantastic. But I think that we'll need less of that if people are actually, living, healthier, day to day.
So awesome. Well, I really, really appreciate you starting to shed some light, not to have too many puns here, but
Yeah.
it's really, I just can't underscore how critical I think, this is that we begin to start taking a look at this. And I certainly imagine you feel the same. And that the fact that you've dedicated, your life's work to this is just absolutely incredible. And I cannot wait to see more from what's coming with your product. I'm just curious if you can share more about what we can expect as your products release. When will that be? What's coming with that? What do you see as part of the future around that new piece of tech?
Sure. So that you'll have to ask Lucas about mainly.
Yes. Okay.
That's not my end of the deal.
Got it.
The way I look at the product though is, I'm interested in it because I think it will enable light therapy to occur in a much more manageable way. Doesn't look weird. It doesn't require you to change your behavior. So I think all that's great. And I also look at it as, this can be, also as a platform, for monitoring health going forward. So, when you look at things like, well, how do we record, people's, brain activity? Or how do we record what kind of light exposure they're getting? Well, I'd say, a pair of glasses is actually a pretty good platform for doing that. And so I kind of see this as, a way to kind of enable, health monitoring going forward. So both, adapting health, both monitoring health as kind of adapting, to what you're doing with the idea that, we can't change people's behaviors by telling them that, what they're doing is wrong. Right. But I think that if we give people the information about what is impacting their health, their feelings, their behavior, I think that can help. So for example, if you wear like a Fitbit or something like that, these give what I consider to be pretty useless information. Saying that you didn't sleep well last night is like, duh. I mean, yeah, I was there. I know I didn't sleep well. Or worse yet, you thought you slept well and it tells you you didn't sleep well.
Right.
So, these devices become useful when they can take other pieces of information and see, how it's influencing. So for example, if it's able to say, oh, well, look, you seem to get inadequate light exposure when you take the subway to work.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, well, I can't really do anything about that. You say, well, but when you walk to work, then you get much better light exposure, and then I have to do less with the blue light during the day, and that when you walk to work, you end up sleeping better at night. And you say, okay, well, maybe I will walk a little more often. Now, again, if the weather is bad or something like that, I'll take the subway. But it's information that you can act on. Or, for example, it says, well, every time you're at the gym and you try to go to sleep within an hour after leaving the gym, you don't sleep well. But if it's 2 hours, then you sleep very well. So I don't know what you're doing at the gym, I don't know if you're hanging out, drinking smoothies, or if you're working out, or if you're doing cardio or playing basketball. I don't know what you're doing. All I know is that whenever you go there, you got to wait 2 hours before you go to bed. Because if you wait an hour, that's no good. So, this becomes, it's kind of making information actionable. That's kind of critical. And I hope that, the glasses and really other technology that's out there really starts to integrate these other pieces of information, because that will give, I think, that will give people the opportunity and hopefully the motivation, to actually change their behavior. Because just telling them they're doing something wrong, that doesn't help. It's what exactly is wrong. And I have to say that, people, myself included, it's very hard to see kind of, what exactly is causing the problem. So if you're not sleeping well, there's 500 reasons why you might not be sleeping well.
Right.
So which one is it? Because frankly, I'll go for the most obvious one, and that's what people do. It's like, well, I didn't sleep well because I have a big presentation at work tomorrow. It's like, well, when we look back, you had several other big presentations at work and you slept fine before those. So maybe it's not that. And really, it's uncovering these patterns that I have to say humans generally aren't so good at. Biohackers, that's something that they look for, but we're all not as dedicated as that.
Right.
And so I think that, this, basically this kind of information, can really feed into this kind of this holistic picture of your behavior and how it really influences, various aspects of your life that matter to you. And I don't ever want to tell people what should matter to them, because what matters to them is personal. So, if it matters that, that you go out and spend time with friends until late at night, that's great. You just have to understand, what the repercussions are. And then you might make decisions that are identical to the ones you made before, or you might make slightly different ones. And at this point, I think that it's getting that information to people, which is so critical.
There's so many gems in there, information that you can act on. I love that. Just uncovering those patterns. I really believe, the whole maxim of my company is that, I'm making the argument that in our modern day society, sleep has become the skill set, which, I'm sure if you went back to some caveman and tried to utter any sort of semblance of that idea, it would just sound ridiculous. And
Exactly.
yet, a large part of, what I'm seeing as the reason for that now does have to do with this kind of narrative or the behavioral change that stem back from the invention of this faux light and, kind of change in our, there's way bigger topic than that. And there's much more to unpack, but that is a big part of the puzzle.
Well, it is. It gives you an opportunity to do things that, frankly, candlelight really didn't.
Right. Exactly.
And,
the party was over when the sun went down back in the day.
I mean, what else are you going to do? All right, you read a little book and then you go to bed. I mean, not much. But now it's like, so it's not only the light, but it's what the light. I mean, and so, a lot of people are fixed on kind of, well, you get all this light exposure at night, but it's also what the light enables you to do, and what the electricity enables you to do. And so not only is it that not only do we have very high powerful lamps and that make things quite bright, but it also is, you have an infinite amount of entertainment, that that you could do. You could continue work. I mean, people, plenty of people I know, after they put their kids to bed, they go back to work. And
Right.
frankly, you can do that until the wee hours in the morning. And so I definitely view, sleep I should say some people, the good sleepers out there, those are the people we hate. They, none of them have ever in their entire lives tried to go to sleep.
Right.
They just go to bed, close their eyes, and they just go to sleep. It's the rest of us who have to try to go to sleep. And it's that we've learned a lot of, bad habits, and these need to get changed. And frankly, there are a lot of people out there, who, work hard all day, toil, really hard physical labor, and a lot of them really don't have a big problem going to sleep. But, for many of us who sit around offices all day, well, I don't see if that's necessarily the most evolutionarily conducive thing for sleep.
Oh my God, preach. I completely agree. Well, I feel as if this is such an exciting topic, and what you guys are creating is, holds the possibility and the potential to really bring about an entirely, new behavior. I'll just share in a personal side note. Have you heard of the app Time Shifter by any chance, for when you're traveling internationally? Helps you kind of shift your time zones, right?
No, I know another one that a colleague of mine made, but I have not heard of that one.
Yeah, so that one, I love, I'm a big proponent of. And so, but the big part of, the keys to making that seamless is it kind of gives you this, really beautifully designed itinerary, essentially, throughout, even if you're on some, 28-hour long flight, which I just did a few months back. And it really became like my holy grail while traveling. And the big part of this is around this strategic implementation and use of light and dark.
Mm-hmm.
And so even just in this case study for, these people that are traveling regularly, across multiple time zones, even just that alone, to be able to have a product like this, because I found it very challenging. I'm so dedicated on this topic that I'm okay to look a little ridiculous. And I would, I'd have like the baseball hats on and the blue blockers and, scarves. And then when I would, when the time comes when you're supposed to get the light exposure, I'm putting on the lights overhead, but then you're that jerk on the flight that has the light on overhead. It's just very inconvenient and possibly, disruptive to people around you. So the concept of having something like this for myself, I've been traveling pretty much full time for about the last 2.5, almost 3 years. And to have something that's portable, can aid in, a more seamless transition for something even just like that. I mean, and obviously that's out of your day to day, but I feel like that alone is so exciting. And what you're speaking about is even bigger. So
I mean, that's, I'd say, a lot of planes now have specialized lighting, right?
Yes.
Where they will actually change the lighting on the plane to match the destination time zone to help you adapt more rapidly. Now, in theory, that's great. But the problem is that not everyone on the plane is that actually going to help. In fact, some people it's going to hurt, because in the end, most of the light exposure that you need is going to be very personal. So, for example, if you're flying from Los Angeles to, Scandinavia, you're going to need one kind of light exposure. Right. But if you had been in Scandinavia, flew to LA for just a day or two and are flying back, well, you need a different kind. If you're flying from Taiwan to Los Angeles and then changing planes and going, in fact, the light is going to send you the wrong direction.
Yes.
So, this kind of one size fits all for light doesn't work. And this is true in the built environment. So in offices, when you try to adjust people's lighting, it can help some people, but not everyone. And so that's why kind of, this kind of personalization, for light exposure, really does kind of matter. And as you point out, with travel, look, at this point, we can't hack the system and shift to 16 hours in one day.
Right.
But we can accelerate how fast you do shift and how, easily you are going to adapt to your new time zone. And that's something that I think we can do. But again, it's just making it as convenient as possible, and something that can be programmed, where you can wear something and it just automatically gives you light when you need it and blocks light when you don't. Well, I think that would be a real benefit.
So true. Yeah. I work with a lot of poker players, and they're in, just wild schedules and in casinos, which, purposely designed to confuse,
Yes.
to confuse the body. So being able to kind of have a way around that you bring in some level of control to what your body, the physiology and the response around the environment. I mean, that's just really exciting. So thank you for the work that you've been doing and what you're creating. And I can't wait to, I'd love to have a part 2 down the road after you guys have, released your product and see, kind of how that all pans out. That's really, really awesome. And just thank you so much for taking the time and helping to educate all of us on this topic a little bit more than the average person.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me on the show.
Awesome. Thank you. You've been listening to the Sleep is a Skill podcast, the #1 podcast for people who want to take their sleep skills to the next level. Every Monday, I send out something that I call Molly's Monday Obsessions, containing everything that I'm obsessing over in the world of sleep. Head on over to sleepisaskill.com to sign up.